For centuries, Eastern disciplines have emphasized the importance of the relationship between the mind and body. These disciplines shed light on what is in fact a very difficult journey, the discovery of new postures and ways of thinking that bring the mind and body into greater harmony. The kinesthetic sense, an awareness of the body in space and time. Every day, every moment, like an animal, the body's instinctual life speaks to us. But do we know how to listen? Many bodywork systems incorporate the work of Mabel Todd, who in 1937 wrote a book called The Thinking Body, in which she detailed many of the basic ideas of body mechanics and mind-body relationship. Her contribution involved using the mind to picture or image the bones and muscles of the body. This process provided a new way to reconnect to the body, much like the practice of yoga and Tai Chi. Nancy Topf, Andre Bernard, and Sally Swift are all part of the legacy of Mabel Todd. In this tape, they will explore some of the basic skeletal images Mabel Todd used in describing how the body moves.
Let your arms play with this stability you have in your feet so that the shoulder blades can slide. That's it.
Nancy Topf, a dancer and choreographer in New York City, studied with a pupil of Mabel Todd's.
I was lucky to meet Barbara Clark, who was a student of Mabel Todd's, who became my teacher. Our first lesson was Barbara placed the heel bone in my hand. And I had been a student of dance for many years, since I was 4 years old and through my college years. And this was an amazing moment in my life, because when I felt that heel bone, Barbara asked me how did I think it went in my body. And realizing I had absolutely no idea made me aware of the deep sense of ignorance that I was working with as I was struggling to become a dancer. And that felt like a real injury to my psyche and my educational process that I was destined to improve and to heal through my work. The body is a landscape. The spine is like the curves of a hillside. And when we can feel that within our body, that aids our kinesthetic sense and develops the kinesthetic sense, which we all have, but are mostly unaware of.
As a child, the rhythms of mind and body are related, and movement is a constant discovery. But as the upright position is assumed, the demands of life create new rhythms. These demands often obscure sensations and feelings coming from the body. The mind and body are no longer related organically.
The mind pulls us so fast out of our bodies, out of our physical experience. Whether you can say you have a physical or mental experience that is separate from one from the other is an interesting question, too. But we know what we're talking about when you say that you're mostly in your mind and you lose the experience of the breath, and the mind pulls you out. And the tendency is to get pulled out into thought. Really leaving the pelvis dropping down.
Now let your shoulders really be over your center instead of behind your center. Good. On your
Sally Swift had a serious back problem as a child. Her mother took her to Mabel Todd's posture studio in Boston, where Sally learned the principles from Mabel Todd that she would later apply as a teacher of writing.
She was a very powerful person. She was not terribly tall, but she was very upright and very, she was stocky. She had a stocky build. And very positive and very sure of herself. course, I don't think I would have survived without Miss Todd. I mean, I would have been a cripple, I think. They would have either put a rod in me, or I would have been in a body cast or whatever. And she prevented all this by her work.
Instead of the head just resting passively, you can start off that way. But then you want to think of the spine growing upward, taking the head up.
As a young actor, Andre Bernard also studied with Barbara Clark. Now he teaches another generation at New York University.
I think Mabel Todd's work is still alive because it does work. I think also that as it has been passed on to the succeeding generations of Mabel Todd, that they have all used it a little differently. When you teach this work to someone, they will use it in accordance with their background, and I would even add, in accordance with their nature. So different persons tend to emphasize different aspects of the work.
It's so interesting to me that the work has more and more reference and application to all sorts of creative people, that not just dancers are affected by it, but the access to the body brings people in touch with a form that they inhabit, that is their house, their basic structure where they live.
Very little is known about Mabel Todd's life. She suffered a serious fall as a young woman. The doctors had said she would never walk again.
She fell down the stairs and damaged herself badly and spent months in bed. But she was always exploring, I guess. And she found that if she did move certain ways, that it didn't hurt. And that she developed the whole thing out of this months she had spent in bed playing with her body to find out how to do things without hurting.
There are certain anatomical principles which I have sort of called the essential anatomical principles. And the reason for them being more essential than others is that they create greater changes in the body towards the goal of this center support, towards making the body more efficiently use itself, so support against gravity. So the bones become important because they are the basic framework that we have for the support of the body, like the steel for a building. Can you really make the change? That's it, Dana. Yes, make the change of the body. Begin from way, way down in the spine. So that is a real reach. It's an extension of your sensation into your spine. Reach into your spine, down into the lumbar spine. And with this, you can really feel how much weight that lumbar spine carries and supports. Another reason that the skeleton is important is that the spine is the central supporting structure. And in this work, the spine becomes like the basic image or anatomical structure that one needs to have reference to it almost all the time to see how arms or legs relate to this supporting structure. Let's work with using the curves of the spine a little bit with the feet so that, remember we looked at the vertebrae and all those curves? So play with working through the spinal curves. Using the head, cervical spine, thoracic spine. Just feel yourself going through the spine as you shift your weight.
The spine is the ultimate compression member. That is, it's the ultimate bony structure when you're in the upright position that transmits the stress of gravity or weight which is what weight is, through the bones of the spine, of itself, into the pelvis, and then down, if you're standing, through the legs, into the earth. See, that down the back is grounding you. While you're doing that, I tell you, that is one of the most important principles that Todd came up with, because no other system, a body system that I'm acquainted with, ever did both. They usually emphasize one or the other. Todd talked about the tensile and compression forces as being that weights either sit on a structure or they hang from a structure. Now, in the human body, the compression members are the bones of the body. The tensile members can be any of the soft tissue, but usually it's the muscles. So now we get to Todd's theory about muscle activity in the body. She felt that we should use the muscle mostly to move the bone and let the bone support the weight. In other words, she was asking us to think in terms of not pulling weight up into the muscle arbitrarily, but rather thinking of the bone supporting the weight. Let the compression members support the weight. Now, that can't be entirely true. There has to be some muscle work to help the bone keep the structure upright. But it's a good way to think about it.
If we direct our attention through the bones to help us find the support, the muscles do less work. There's less fatigue, there's less holding. The bones are meant to give us that support, that framework of structural support. And the muscles are meant for movement. And, you know, there's a different quality of movement if you focus mainly on muscular effort or if you focus on skeletal movement, which skeletal movement would involve much more of joint action and that kind of quality of ease of folding and unfolding through a joint. There's a muscle development, which people do decide they want. They go and lift weights, and they actually bulk up their muscles, and the movement's a very different quality. It has effort. It has the muscular effort that is contained in that practice of lifting weights. And you can decide which kind you prefer, and I think sometimes it is an aesthetic decision.
Every teacher had a skeleton, and there were sometimes 3 or 4 teachers in that department. So that the skeleton was just second-hand, just automatic as far as I was concerned. They also all had a stack of books over at the side, which they would open up and show you muscles and how things worked. And they did this a lot. Breathe, and find that depth and the quiet of it. And begin to spin your ball in a dress rehearsal ahead. So the horse turns, he knows what you're going to do before you do it. Little dress rehearsal before you get there. That's what the centering is all about, that dress rehearsal ahead. Centered riding is pretty direct descendant of Miss Todd, I think. I used to find that if I took an imaginary ball inside myself and dropped it into my pelvis, and it would land with a thunk as if it were mud, I could immediately do anything I wanted on that horse, which was quite interesting. And she didn't call it centering, but I think that's what it really was. I think that it's very hard to do this without some sort of touch. That is the stepping stone that allows you to find your center. And once you've found it with some help, then you begin to find it without help.
You're like a fountain, and it falls down, with the energy just coming, zooming up your spine. And the shoulder blades and the elbows and the hands are like the water flowing down the outside. And the more support you feel in that center, the more upward thrust, the more release you can have in your shoulders and hands and arms, right? Careful observation of the skeleton helps us form images of our bodies. These images are pictures that we form from this observation that we then internalize into sensation and feelings. We can use our mind to see within the body and to feel what we are seeing. And the seeing within the body becomes a way of knowing. And the mind and body go back and forth in a dialogue through seeing, which is perceptual, to feeling, which is kinesthetic. Kinesthetic involves a sensation, and seeing involves our perception. And we are shifting between perception and sensation. And the perception brings the awareness, and the sensation is the physical experience of the body.
Now, in this position, think of the spine lengthening downward, the tailbone releasing into length, getting longer and longer and longer. Just think that. I sometimes describe the experience as think-feel. It's a think-feel, which is what the image, when it's working, does. You think the image, and then you get an experience from it. What we're saying is that we are communicating with the muscles through the intention of what we wish to do with the structure.
Just see if in this position you can visualize those curves of the spine, backward curve of the sacrum. And this is the rest position, constructive rest.
Constructive rest is a position in which one is lying on one's back with the knees flexed or bent. And in this position, she gave a lot of the imagery. So you don't need any tensile support in this position. It's all compression. The bones are resting on what you're lying on. Let them rest. No need to pull anything up or to hold anything in place. Now, the reason that she used this position is that it is the position in which you need the least amount of muscle support. Now, why is that important? It's important because if you are using your muscle system while you are trying to change muscle pattern, it becomes very difficult to change these established muscle patterns while you're using them. Because while you're using them, the old message is going through the nervous system to the muscles to maintain that established pattern. So here you come along with a new message, and this is very difficult to implant through the nervous system because, as what I've said, that it's already an established pattern. And there comes to be a conflict there. It's what I sometimes describe as being confusing to the nervous system. Now, the old pattern can be changed, requires a lot of repetition. So what we do with the images is on a conscious level to send another message in to our being to change that. This is why thinking is so important, and why I tell some of my students who say they haven't the ability to visualize, I say, don't worry, just think it. You don't have to make motion pictures in your head for these images, because you need simply to think it. Think, feel, think, experience it. That's where it's at. Todd's book was called The Thinking Body, not the imaging body. the thinking body.
All the movements that babies make are for the purpose of strengthening their structural alignment, so that every lift of the head and every push with the hand has a purpose to bring the baby into a very healthy upright posture. And it's very useful for us in our work with alignment to have a reference to developmental movement, which is the baby's movement, so that we can repattern our own structural alignment. Really stretch that foot. Now walk the hands around to the center, both feet together. Walk the hands out into the baby. This is really where it feels, that's it, really comfortable and familiar. That's like where the baby began getting up. The psoas muscle is the muscle that babies develop in all of the movements that they execute on their pathway up to the vertical axis. The psoas muscle attaches the inside of the legs, passes through the pelvis, and attaches to many of the vertebrae of the spine. There's a right and a left psoas. It is the muscle that helps support the lumbar spine and gives us a way of imaging the central axis. It is functioning exactly on the central axis of gravity, so that as gravity falls through the body as a weight, the psoas muscle supports that weight that we experience in an upward force. It helps the body in the center support its weight against the force of gravity. And stretch that psoas and see if you can find the through line right from the belly through the center of the rib cage. We get involved with understanding the muscles only if they relate directly to our skeletal structure. The psoas muscle is a muscle that connects to the spine directly and helps us understand how strong the spine can become. The other muscle that's very important to understand in terms of the structure is the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which helps us understand the support of the skull.
Who is the puppeteer? Puppeteer has been giving you support and you don't even know who he is or she is. Well, I'll tell you who the puppeteer is. The puppeteer is the back half of your head, because a pair of very important muscles attaches to the sternum and to the mastoid processes called the sternocleidomastoid muscles. So when you lift that back half of the head properly, your sternum is hanging from there. But I be sure that I keep the back half of the head up. I don't do this. See how I let's go with this and let's go with the head. Now, all of this is easier said than done. You know, Todd was accused of promising more than she could deliver. Well, that isn't exactly true. She gave the tools in the form of imagery, but a teacher of this work can't go much beyond that, because these are the tools. I can't do it for you. You have to find the truth of it. That's why I urge you, trust me, but verify. In other words, don't trust me. See if it's true by practicing it, and see if you can find these coordinations that I'm telling you about. That's what I did. As I am looking at the work in these last few years, I see it as a work that is fundamental toward your living better. Because the nervous system, you see, is responding to the clarity and the intensity of your intention, even of your insight.
We've all had the experience of looking at nature and being inspired by a beautiful sunset or sunrise. And when we look at the body, we can also have that wonderful inspiration only if we know about the body and what we're looking at. When you take a look at that skeleton and really use your eyes, there's something that occurs that's bigger than the body, the inner vision, and then helps to identify the kinesthetic sense.